What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me today. We're going to talk a little bit about somebody that I think we might be able to target in free agency, right? If we're looking for depth at the wide receiver position, we've been looking for depth there. Chris Ballard sounds like he wants to go after a guy that's going to be able to provide depth for this team, be able to provide something in this offense. And the question is, how does he fit, right? Chris Ballard has talked about explosiveness, which is one thing that we might hinder away from this guy, but this is somebody that I like as a player, somebody that I think could bring value to the team. So I figured, hey, let's talk about it. Let's see what everybody thinks about adding this guy. So, and when we're talking about it, remember, we have four definites on the team for next year, right? Michael Pittman Jr. sounds like he's come back. Then we're going to have Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, and Ashton Doolin. And when you look at what the Colts were doing in 2023, most weeks they were rolling with six guys, and they were commonly bringing one up off the practice squad, and that would be the sixth guy just to fill a spot and somebody to play special teams. But just remember, we're rolling with six. We got to find two. That's why I think this guy might be an option. What we're going to talk about here is going to be KJ Osborn from the Minnesota Vikings. And right now, there's really no telling what's going to happen with KJ Osborn. So I felt like this was something that we might think about. You know, Chris Ballard and his team might be thinking about in terms of depth. And there are reasons for that more than just being a receiver, right? And we'll talk about that. But when you look at what he was able to do as a receiver for the Vikings, his rookie year, he didn't get any snaps as a receiver, but he did get some experience as a punt returner and a kick returner where he had 7 punt returns for 27 yards. His longest was 8. And he had 14 kick returns for 303 yards, which is an average of 21.6. His longest was 38. So in terms of what he was doing on special teams at Minnesota, just not a lot going on there. Wasn't able to find a whole lot of success. But then you look past that, he started getting reps as a receiver in his second season, and then in his third season, and then, of course, last season. And he had more of an impact, right? Started 9 games in both 2021, 2022. Then you look at 2023. The Vikings, of course, drafted Jordan Addison, but that didn't stop KJ Osborn from being able to start 12 games. So even in the last season where it's still a crowded room of wide receivers, he was able to find his way on the field. Now, I mentioned crowded room of wide receivers. When he got drafted, okay, he was looking at a situation where it was Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson got drafted in the first round of that 2020 draft as well, right? So he had Adam Thielen there, and then Adam Thielen leaves. Well, Jordan Addison gets drafted, and it was basically those two, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So KJ Osborn still getting pushed down, but still being able to have an impact on the offense. You look at his stats season to season. Again, 2020 his rookie season. Didn't see the offense as a receiver that year, but you look at 2021, he ended up with 50 catches for 655 yards and 7 touchdowns. And when you look at the 50 catches, 655 yards, it's 13.1 yards per reception, which is a really good number, especially for a guy that's just getting into his first action really in the NFL. Okay, then you look at 2022, where he has more catches with 60, but 5 less yards. You see his yards per reception go down to 10.8. He has 5 touchdowns. So all in all, stats for the most part all going down, but his catch rate did go up from 61% to 66.7%, right? And when you look at this last season, 2023, he ends up with 48 catches for 540 yards and 3 touchdowns. So stats going down, but again, Jefferson and Addison kind of dominating things for most of the year. But the good thing is that his yards per reception went back up a little bit to 11.3. So not a huge jump from 2022, but he has that steady figure, right? In his career average, it's 11.7, which is slightly higher than you see from Michael Pittman Jr. So the question becomes, do you pay a guy like that? And when you ask that question, I looked up his estimated value, and this is according to Spotrac. No telling how accurate any of this stuff really is, but they have it at 2 years, $15.13 million, an average salary of just north of $7.5 million. So is it worth it when you look at what other receivers are making, right? And you see what do you want KJ Osborn to do? I think that might be a pretty fair contract. I think 7.5 might be a little steep, but again, wide receivers making a lot of money, so I might be, in my Chris Ballard era right here, right? Maybe a little bit cheap in my mind. But 7.5, I think if you get KJ Osborn, the expectation, okay, the reason why that might end up being too cheap for KJ Osborn is because in college he was also a returner, right? He had a lot of return experience in college, and then his senior year he ended up going from Buffalo to Miami, where he ended up being the number one receiver there. He led all receivers in catches, yards, touchdowns that season, even though it wasn't like an incredible amount there with Miami. He was still their number one wide receiver, comes into the NFL, gets drafted round 5, pick 31 in that round. And again, because of the wide receiver rooms that he's been in, right? Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, really hasn't had a chance to flourish. So I think with the Colts, you bring him in, he has that returner experience. So you don't have to have Josh Downs being a returner. Dallas Flowers, if he ends up being a starter, you don't have to have him returning. You could have KJ Osborn playing some special teams and having that role, but also pushing Alec Pierce for that number 2 wide receiver role. And I think a guy like KJ Osborn can be really valuable for a lot of the reasons where Chris Ballard was talking about Ashton Doolin and all the things that he can do. He can play inside or he can play outside. He can play on special teams and do a lot of different things and be an all-pro type player on special teams. So there are a lot of things Ashton Doolin can do. KJ Osborn can come in and be kind of that same type of player. Right now, KJ Osborn is going to want to try to go somewhere where he can push to get some playing time. So will he come to the Colts and try to do that? That's a question. That's up in the air. But from the Colts perspective, I think it makes sense, right? You're looking at a guy who, when you look at numbers from his combine, was running a 4.4840, which was the 6th best in the 2020 draft. He also had a 37.5-inch vertical leap. His cone drill was 7 seconds. His bench press was 18. So this isn't the most athletic guy that you're going to get at receiver. But in terms of athletes that you can put on the field, he is one of the best. Okay, this is a guy like, again, 4.48 nowadays. 4.48 sounds a little slower because there are so many guys that can run 4.4, sub 4.4, but running a 4.48 is still moving. Like, that is moving. Okay, 18 bench press reps at 225 is still a lot. Okay, 37.5-inch vertical. That's over 3 feet in the air that he's able to jump. So again, there are a lot of uber athletic guys coming in that will make some of these numbers sound like it's not that great, but this is still a very athletic guy, a guy that can come in and make a difference on special teams, a guy that can push Alec Pierce and create competition. That's the main thing, is creating competition. So is it going to be KJ Osborn? Is he the guy that we want to come in and push for that number 5 spot and push for that number 2 spot, right? And there's going to be more, right? And with there being 6 spots that the Colts like to have guys, going into game week, then I think KJ Osborn could be a guy, and the Colts could still draft a guy and find a guy that could push for that number 2 role as well. And they could figure it out as the year goes. And how are these guys going to play? We know Ashton Doolin can do a little bit of everything. Again, KJ Osborn, I feel like, can do a little bit of everything. And then you draft a guy and figure out, is somebody going to be, mostly practice squad and then get called up? Are we going to roll into week to week? Are we going to sign 6 guys throughout the season and have it that way? It'll be interesting to see how that works out. We're going to look at more guys that are free agents this year, but some of those lower tier guys, we've talked so much about the high tier guys, and now T. Higgins is the highest profile one that we've talked about. T. Higgins got the franchise tag. The only way we're getting him is with the trade, which is on the table, but I don't think it's likely. So we're going to talk about some of these lower level guys that we could come in, bring in to create competition. Some of these guys are going to have lower salaries for wide receivers. And we're going to continue to talk about whether or not we should sign these different guys. If there's anybody you can think of off the top of your head that you'd be curious to talk about, let me know down in the comments section. But make sure you're subscribed with those notifications on so you get notified as more videos continue to roll out, whether it's free agency, draft, combine, whatever it is. We're going to have videos every single day. So make sure you have those notifications turned on. Of course, I appreciate you stopping by for another video. And as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.